The funeral had just ended, but the house still clung to the heavy scent of bleach and the faint smoke of extinguished candles. It seeped into every corner, wrapping around the curtains, slipping through the cracks of the floorboards, and settling deep in the bones of the walls. 10 years of caring for his bedridden mother, Mrs. Margaret Bennett, I thought this long, joyless chapter of my life was finally over. I believed that, even without passion, James and I could at least grow old quietly, side by side. But as we sat at the table surrounded by mourners, James didn't once look at me. His eyes were fixed on a plate of untouched appetizers. Then, out of nowhere, he said simply, "Let's get a divorce. This just isn't working, and it's not worth it." 10 years. 10 whole years of sleepless nights, endless sacrifices, and giving up my own dreams to nurse his mother. And now, all of that was brushed aside with 3 cold words. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just looked at him calmly and said, "Okay." The room was thick with unspoken words, a heavy silence that hung like a dense fog between us. Guests chatted quietly in small groups, their voices low, unsure if they should break the tension at the table. But James and I sat opposite one another, worlds apart despite the inches that separated us. For a moment, I studied him carefully. His face was pale, drained from the weight of grief, yet there was something colder in his eyes, something distant that hadn't been there before. I remembered the early days of our marriage when his laughter filled the house, and his touch brought comfort even on the darkest days. That man felt like a stranger now. I thought about the sacrifices I had made over the last decade. Nights spent awake, listening for the slightest sound from his mother's room, days lost in endless care, meals skipped, dreams put on hold. I was exhausted, but I never let him see it. I carried the burden quietly, because that was what love required, wasn't it? To give everything without complaint. But what was love now? A word thrown aside like yesterday's news. 10 years of loyalty, 10 years of devotion, and his response was so cold, so final. Still, I kept my voice steady when I spoke. "If this is what you want, James, I won't stand in your way." He glanced up then, surprised by my calmness, perhaps expecting tears or anger. But I had learnt that losing myself in pain would only weaken me. Instead, I felt a fire kindling inside, a quiet resolve. This was not the end. It was a beginning I had not chosen but would face nonetheless. As the evening wore on, I excused myself from the room. Alone in the garden, under the grey Surrey sky, I let the tears come. Not for him, not for the marriage that was unraveling, but for the woman I had lost along the way. I had been invisible for so long, a caretaker who had forgotten how to live. But the next chapter was mine, whether James liked it or not. For 10 years, my life had been put on hold like a book left open on the same page, gathering dust. Every day revolved around James's mother, Margaret. From dawn until late at night, I was her nurse, her companion, her only lifeline. I learned how to manage her pain, how to change dressings, how to soothe her restless mind when she drifted between lucidity and confusion. I gave up my career as a school teacher, convinced that my duty was here, in this quiet Surrey home where the walls seemed to echo with memories and silence. Friends stopped calling after a while. Invitations to dinners, theatre, even holidays slipped away, replaced by hospital visits, physiotherapy sessions, and endless rounds of medication. James was distant most days. His grief wrapped around him like a cloak, and I was left to pick up the pieces, to be the steady hand behind the scenes. I rarely asked for help, afraid to burden him further. I thought this was what marriage meant: sacrifice, endurance, quiet strength. But sacrifice without recognition slowly chips away at the soul. I became a ghost in my own life, a woman who woke each morning to the same routine, the same exhaustion, the same silent suffering. And yet, I never imagined that after all I had done, James would simply walk away. That the years I gave him, the loyalty and love I poured into this family, would be dismissed as if they were nothing. Now, faced with the reality of divorce, I had to ask myself what was left of me. Was I still Sarah Bennett, the woman who dreamed of adventure and happiness? Or just a shadow of the caretaker I had been forced to become? That night, I sat by the window long after James had gone to bed. The Surrey moon cast a pale glow over the garden. I made a promise to myself that I would find my way back, no matter how hard it might be. I didn't know yet what form that would take, but I knew the first step was to reclaim my own life. Days passed after the funeral, and the house felt colder than before. James spent most of his time away, leaving me alone with memories and the silence that seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. I busied myself with small tasks, trying to keep the house from sinking into despair. Then, one rainy afternoon, I found an envelope tucked away in Margaret's old desk. It was sealed, with my name written in a careful, familiar hand. My heart quickened as I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The words inside stunned me, a message from Margaret herself, written in her steady script before she passed. She had known more than anyone suspected. She knew the strain our marriage was under, the sacrifices I had made quietly. But there was more, a secret she entrusted only to me, a legacy hidden in plain sight. Margaret's letter spoke of a small cottage in the Cotswolds, a place she had purchased years before, paid for with her own savings. She wanted me to have it, to build a new life away from the shadows of grief and duty. The key to the cottage was inside the envelope, along with instructions to take whatever time I needed. Tears streamed down my face as I read those words. After years of invisibility, after years of feeling trapped, here was a gift I never expected. A chance to start over, on my own terms. That night, I packed a small bag and sat by the window again, the letter clutched tightly in my hand. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a decade, I felt a flicker of hope. James may have given up on us, but I hadn't given up on myself. The morning mist curled gently over the rolling hills of the Cotswolds as I arrived at the little cottage Margaret had left me. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light on the honey-colored stone walls and the wildflowers that framed the garden. It was nothing like the house I had left behind, quiet, untouched by years of sorrow. The key fit perfectly into the old brass lock. As the door creaked open, a rush of fresh air swept through the empty rooms. I walked inside, my footsteps echoing softly, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of excitement. The cottage was modest but charming. The wooden beams overhead, the stone fireplace, and the shelves filled with books made it feel like a sanctuary. I imagined mornings spent with tea by the window, afternoons tending to the garden, and evenings curled up by the fire with a good novel. That day, I made a silent vow to myself, this would be the place I rebuilt my life, where I would rediscover who I was beyond the roles of carer and wife. I unpacked the small bag I had brought, placing each item carefully in its new home. But as night fell and the cottage grew quiet, a new challenge loomed. How would James react when he found out? Would he come looking for me, or had he truly moved on? And most importantly, could I find the strength to leave the past behind and embrace this new chapter? The cottage felt like a promise, a beacon in the darkness. But the road ahead was uncertain, and I was determined to face it, step by step. The days in the Cotswolds slipped by with a peaceful rhythm I had long forgotten. Mornings were filled with the scent of freshly brewed tea and the gentle chirping of birds outside my window. Afternoons were spent tending the garden, pruning roses and planting bulbs, slowly coaxing life back into the neglected soil. Evenings were quiet, save for the crackle of the fire and the pages of books that I devoured, rekindling my love for stories and learning. Yet, despite the calm, a part of me remained restless, haunted by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Would James truly let me go without a fight? Would the scars of the past heal in time? And what did the future hold for a woman who had spent so many years in the shadows? One afternoon, as I walked through the nearby village, I met Thomas, a local craftsman known for his skill in woodworking. His workshop was a treasure trove of beautiful furniture and delicate carvings, each piece telling its own story. Thomas was warm and kind, with a gentle smile that put me at ease. We began to talk, slowly at first, then more freely as days passed. He shared stories of the village, its history, and its people. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, the simple joy of connection after so long in isolation. But even as new friendships blossomed, I knew my journey was far from over. There were still wounds to heal, truths to face, and strength to gather. The cottage was my sanctuary, but life was calling me to step beyond its walls. With every sunrise, I felt a little stronger, a little more ready to embrace whatever the future held. The past was behind me, but its echoes remained, reminders of a life once lived and the woman I was becoming. Several weeks had passed since I settled into the cottage. The peace of the Cotswolds began to seep into my bones, and I started to rebuild a sense of self that had been buried beneath years of sacrifice and silence. Yet, the past was never far behind. One afternoon, as I sorted through the mail left at the cottage, an envelope caught my eye. The handwriting was unmistakable, James's neat, familiar script. My heart pounded, unsure whether to open it immediately or set it aside. Finally, curiosity won. Inside, I found a letter that was unlike anything I expected. James wrote about his regrets, the years he had taken for granted, and the coldness that had crept into our marriage. He confessed that he had been struggling with his own guilt over how he treated me, especially during those long years caring for his mother. But then, the letter took a surprising turn. James revealed that he had discovered something about Margaret's past, a secret that he believed could change everything. He asked me to meet him, to talk face to face, to finally confront the truths that had been buried too long. I felt a swirl of emotions, anger, sadness, hope, and uncertainty. Was this a genuine attempt to make amends, or another cruel twist in a story filled with pain? Could I forgive him, or was this the moment to finally close the chapter for good? I stood by the window, the letter clutched tightly in my hand, as the sun dipped below the horizon. The choice lay before me, and with it, the possibility of a new path, or the final goodbye. The day of the meeting arrived with a heavy weight on my chest. I chose the small cafe in the village, a neutral place where old memories would not haunt us. James was already there when I arrived, sitting quietly, his face lined with exhaustion and regret. He wasted no time. The secret he revealed shook me to my core. Margaret, his mother, had left behind not just memories, but a hidden letter and documents proving that much of her estate was legally not James's. There was another heir, someone unknown to us both, someone Margaret had quietly supported in her final years. James's voice faltered as he explained how this discovery upended everything he thought he knew about family and legacy. For years, he had carried the burden of entitlement, and now, that burden was lifted but replaced by confusion and pain. I listened silently, absorbing the truth that changed the foundation of our lives. For a moment, the years of bitterness and betrayal softened, replaced by a strange, quiet understanding. But as the conversation came to an end, James looked at me with tired eyes and said, "I'm sorry for everything, but I think it's best if we part ways for good. I hope you find peace here." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and sorrow. The past had been a heavy shackle, but now it was time to break free. Walking away from the cafe, the weight lifted from my shoulders, I felt the first true breath of freedom in years. The cottage, the garden, the quiet life I was building, these were no longer refuges from pain but the foundations of a new future. And with that, my story moved forward, not defined by loss or betrayal, but by resilience and hope.